Welcome back to another episode of Card Talk, a podcast where we spend a little bit of time talking about cards from Lord of the Rings card game. I'm your host, David Walsh.
And I'm Grant Thompson, just along for the ride.
And I'm Ted Bannock, and I love talking about cards.
So, Grant, what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about a leadership event from the Voice of Isengard expansion, the Legacy of Numenor, the zero-cost Doomed 4, with an action, add one resource to each hero's resource pool.
Oh, so, Grant, what do you think of this card?
I like it and hate it at the same time.
A love-hate relationship with all player cards that have the doomed keyword.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So, have you used it a ton or not used it, or what's
I've used it a little bit. I wouldn't say a ton, but I've used it enough to understand what it does.
Let me ask you a question before we get into the mechanics of the card. I know the lore of Numenor, the island that sank, it's based on Atlantis and things like that, but why is this card the Legacy of Numenor? It's Doomed 4, like people are going to die but you get resource. What's the theme behind this? Why is it called Legacy of Numenor? I have no idea why.
I think it's based on the fact that it's the Tower of Orthanc. By looking at the picture, it's a Tower of Orthanc that was built by the Numenorians. So they left the legacy there, but it's been corrupted over the ages, and hence the Doomed 4.
I had forgotten that Orthanc was built by the Numenorians.
Yeah, I think it kind of ties into the theme of, you mentioned, the Numenorians are sort of based off of Atlantis, right? So it's kind of like this they were this great society that was great, and it rose to the top, it had all these resources with this extravagant entity, but then it's got doomed, right? It failed. Despite its greatness, it didn't work.
Yeah, most cards that I see, I'm like, okay, I get it. And this was one that I just couldn't put it together. So, okay, between the two, you guys, you help set. Wait, this is a throwback. You set me straight. Okay. So, Ted, what's your scoop on Legacy of Numenor?
To be honest, I don't mind playing the Doom cards, but Doomed 4 is pretty terrifying. I mean, that's 4 turns. If you were to think about it in terms of how many turns you would accumulate for a threat, that's 4 turns. Mm-hmm. And you get 3 resources, and that can be pretty powerful.
If you're playing 12 players, you get 12 resources. Or not 12. I'm sorry. If you're playing 4 players, you get 12 because every hero gets a resource.
Yeah. I once played I very recently played a multiplayer game where first turn somebody played 2. So the entire table took an 8 threat raise to get 2 extra resources on each hero. And it's big and it's a lot of threat, but it accelerates your board state fast. I was surprised. I played almost every ally that I had in my hand.
Right.
With starting with 9 resources because they played 2. That's 3 turns into the game, right? Where you should be, you're doing it turn 1.
Right, but then if you're starting at 28 threat, you're at 36 threat, and all of a sudden here comes a hill troll or something, right?
Yep.
Yeah. That's the crazy hard part about playing the Doom cards. When you're playing Doom cards, I think we said when we were talking about Grima, it's easier to play Grima and Doomed cards when you're playing solo because you're only screwing yourself over. But who knows if the person playing across from you is ready to deal with 4 threat. And Doomed 4 is the biggest Doom there is. Even Saruman is only Doomed 3. So for this, it's
I think it's appropriately costed though.
Sure.
Because if it was less than Doom 4, I would like say it's too powerful. But I don't know, Grant. What do you think about the 4 level? Like, is
I,
that too much or too little for 3
I,
resources?
I think it's accurate for what it does. I think it works well when you know what, if you're playing the game cooperatively, so you discuss what you're going to do. If you're just sitting down at a table and you're playing the game blind, like with the table talk rule enabled, and that's just a way to say, you know what, I'm just going to troll you. Doom 4, there's Green at Doom 5.
Well, yeah, it's definitely a good card for the grief deck, right? Like that's
exactly. And he has an extra 2 more points for deep knowledge.
Yeah.
But no, I think Legacy of Numenor is accurate, as you say. It's a leadership card, which I would have probably preferred seeing it in something like either law or even spirit, rather than leadership, because leadership already has a lot of resource acceleration.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really interesting thing that you say that, because I've reached for this card a couple of times, and every time I've reached for it, it was in the wrong sphere. That I was like, where is Legacy of Numenor? And I thought it was a lore card, and then I thought it was a spirit card for what? Like, I don't reach for this card every day of my life. Let's get that sorted out. But and then I'm always surprised to find it in leadership, because leadership has all sorts of ways to accelerate the board state that doesn't screw you over. Like you play turn 1 Steward of Gondor, you're set. You play leadership Denethor, you are doing good stuff. This is good in specific deck builds, and I think it scales better than some cards, but I don't know if it scales to 4 players as good. Like, I just don't know how well, if you're playing 4 player, how well everybody at the table is going to want to.
Well,
I don't know.
I've seen it in great effect in 2 games that I played. The first game, a player played 2 copies, and then the second game they played 1 copy. And I'd say it's actually much better for the reasons you said in a multiplayer game, because in a low player count, you have cards like Steward and Captain's Wisdom,
right, all
Wealth of Gondor,
right.
All these leadership cards that let you accelerate resources.
But that's only for you, I guess, right?
Right, exactly. Some of the cards you can target. I think Wealth of Gondor can target any hero that is the Gondor
but it's still
trait.
Just one of the people, right?
There are certain quests in the game that you like getting over the first turn is the most difficult part of the game.
Now, does it say that every hero gets a resource? Is that what it says?
I believe so.
Add 1 resource to each hero's resource.
So that means, like, during the like in the campaigns, or if you've sword thained somebody, or like, it's possible to really take advantage of this a little bit. By Caldara and then I don't know, Prince Imrahil, like have 4 or 5 heroes out or something. Thalion.
That's a great point.
Thalion can be a hero if it's good. But I feel like those cards all happen late game, and you probably don't need this late game. My sense of this card is that this is like turn 1, turn 2, so you can get your board state going. If you're waiting to get a Sword Thane onto Legolas or something, that's how the Slippery Sylvan deck works. Then you're not going to ever play this card.
Yeah, it's definitely something you want in your opening hand. You're right, turn 1 or turn 2, drawing it late game. You've been playing 4 or 5 turns, maybe mid game, and maybe your threat's gone up because of the treachery cards. Doomed keyword the encounter deck has increased it. You might not be in a spot where you're like, oh, now I'm so far behind. 4 more threat is gonna, put me too far too
Right.
far, too close to 50.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm also thinking of those scenarios where you're too close to the engagement cost of whatever the big baddie is that you're starting off with. So, like
Oh, sure.
in Journey Along the Anduin or Journey Down the Anduin, or I always forget if it's along or down.
Along the Anduin.
Yeah, but
With the hill troll.
right? But that's the thing. How you're starting at 26, 28 threat. And all of a sudden somebody plays a Legacy of Numenor on you, and it's you're engaging the hill troll. And that's I guess that's the cost benefit that happens when you play this card. You have to weigh that out.
It's definitely a risk and reward scenario card to be played. Do you want to risk it, and is it going to give you enough of a reward to equalize the threat that you gain?
Right?
That is the absolute best analysis I've ever heard of the card.
Right. And I mean, it's Keys of Orthanc. You play Keys of Orthanc with this. Like, I mean, it's not like this card. There's a ton of like secret combo something, or like I bet you want to play your threat reduction when you have this, or
Yep.
It's not like we're that's not like there's anything. So you want to play Spirit, or you want to play Woodman's Clearing or something, and so you can get it down to where you get your threat down to where it needs to go.
Or again, the lore version of Aragorn is Doom cards like number one buddy, right?
Elfhelm from the Rohan ally, Elfhelm.
Okay.
When you get doomed, when he's ready, he reduces your threat by 1.
Oh.
Or when you raise your threat, sorry. So when you raise your threat, you then get to lower your threat by 1.
I don't know actually if Elfhelm is a super great card. His ability is phenomenal. I don't know if he works. I don't think he works with player Doom cards though, because his ability.
Or by an encounter or quest card effect. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be?
But he's still a great pairing because he's reducing your threat from those other effects from the encounter deck. So that way, if you get doomed out of the encounter deck, he's adjusting it for you, leaving your room to play
He's
the
just
Doom
not triggering off
on your own player card.
Right. And this card also, I guess we'd be stupid not to mention it, but like this card doesn't. I mean, it's a non-consideration with Grima. Other than Grima's the gateway into Doom cards, this card, it doesn't have a cost, so you're not lowering, any cost by this card. So, it's you don't need to have Grima in your deck to run Legacy of Numenor. So, I don't know. What else do we have to say about this thing?
I think we're ready to ring.
Are we ready to ring?
Ready to ring, RTR.
RTR. Okay. So for anybody who is new to Card Talk or has forgotten, we have a highly scientific yet arbitrary system where we rate the cards on a scale from 1 to 10, where 1 is the best card in the game and 10 is the bike spokes, binder, trash, botter, I don't know. It's horrible. It's the Brock Iron Fist of the game. Ted, we did that card before you came on, just because we know how much you love every card in the game. So
I do. God help me, I do.
So, Legacy of Numenor. Who wants to go first?
I'll let you go first, David.
Okay.
You rarely go first.
Yeah. I think it's pretty easy to rate this card. I think that this card fits into just kind of a special deck. It's not a general use card, and I think that it's kind of eclipsed by some of the other
resource accelerator.
Yeah, resource accelerators that are out there. But it does do when you do play it. I think that it plays really nicely as long as you're ready for it. And it's an early game card. So I think that I have to give this card 8 rings. I bet you didn't know that 8 began with the letter S, but so I'm going to give this card 8 rings. But I have played this card a couple of times, and I do like how it plays, but I just don't play it hardly at all because I end up choosing something else to play. Grant, what do you think?
I like the idea of the card. I like the thematics of the card. I've played it a little bit, not extensively. I'm giving it a 7 rings. That Doom 4, as we've discussed, is accurate, but it is still on the bit of the hefty side for me to say put it over instead of Steward of Gondor or other forms of resource acceleration.
Okay.
So, Ted, what about you?
Yeah, I'll bump it up a little bit. Give it the best rating, probably a 6, I'd say, because it can have a very high impact on the game, especially at multiplayer counts of 3 and 4, being able to give other players resources. But the card has the biggest drawback is not actually the Doom 4. It's that you kind of need it in your opening hand. Certainly at the middle end of the game, it can still make an impact where you're like, oh, I couldn't afford this ally and now I can. But it's so much more potent, turn 1, turn 2. So if you don't get it with a mulligan, it kind of might be a dead card halfway through the game.
Yeah. Okay, so there you guys have it. Legacy of Numenor. Join us next time as we talk about more cards from the game. Have a great day. And if you're interested in finding this or any of our back episodes of Card Talk, feel free to search YouTube where you can find our flagship video episodes with the username Card Talk 2018. Or you can search the RSS feed cardtalk2018.libsyn.org for our extended audio versions of our podcast. Or you can find us on Facebook at Card Talk 2018. And if you have any questions for Grant or myself or for both of us, feel free to email us at cardtalk2018@gmail.com.